Edgewood University. Year 1. Episode 9. Light. Could you imagine having wings and being able to soar freely above the clouds? Layla Holland. Where do you think they're going? Asked Alex, and Connor shook his head, watching Layla leave the dining hall. I don't know, but there's one way we can find out, he said, getting up from the table, and Cody and Alex followed him. The sun felt good on Layla's skin as she, Faith, Bailey, and Cassidy walked across the schoolyard. Layla spread her arms, spun in a circle, and faced her friends. Now watch this, she said, grinning and taking several steps back. Bailey, Cassidy, and Faith watched as Layla closed her eyes, blew a breath, and opened crimson glowing ones. The magic fire ribbons swirled around her body, and Layla stretched her flaming dragon wings. Cody, Alex, and Connor hid behind a tree and watched Layla lift into the air. She smiled at her friends and flapped the enormous wings. That's amazing, said Cassidy, and Bailey and Faith agreed, staring at their friend. Layla grinned and shot off into the sky, and her friends laughed, running after her. Bailey, Cassidy, and Faith stopped running and caught their breath, watching their friend. What is she doing? Asked Connor, approaching with Alex and Cody. Faith, Bailey, and Cassidy turned around, glanced at the guys, and watched Layla. Flying? What's it look like she's doing? Said Faith, and Alex snickered. Are we a little snippy? He said, and Faith stuck her tongue out. It's remarkable, breathed Connor, watching Layla soar around the university, and Faith eyed him suspiciously. She really did a number on you. Has the famous Connor Lancer met his match and found the one female on this planet who can bring the old stubborn, pig-headed alpha to his knees? She whispered, and Cassidy frowned. Faith heard the soft growl rumble in her brother's chest, and she shrugged nonchalantly. What do you want, anyway? Snapped Cassidy in an unfriendly tone. Faith playfully pouted at her brother, and Connor snickered. Calm down, killer. Layla was kind enough to heal my face. I thought I should thank her, he said in a deep voice, and Cassidy's expression softened. Well, that's very noble of you. Faith snorted and slapped her leg. Noble? My brother doesn't have a noble bone in his body. She laughed. Connor looked at the ground and growled with red glowing eyes. Give your big brother some credit. I'm learning how to be nicer. He growled, and Faith searched his eyes. She had seen that look before when their mother was still alive. When it came to her, Connor bowed down to her even if the woman was wrong. He was the oldest and a huge mama's boy. Their mother would always steer him in the right direction when he lost his way, but after she died, Connor turned cold and mean. After that, when their father passed, Connor was given the alpha power, and he turned even colder. You're serious? That's the same look you gave Mom when she corrected you, she whispered, and he grunted, rolling his eyes. Connor tried to make her stand down and get away from him, but Faith knew how to fight the alpha command. She started at age 7, and by the time Connor became alpha of the family pack, she had it mastered. He snarled at his sister, and Faith raised an eyebrow. She laughed and rubbed his back. Oh, dear brother, when will you ever learn? I'm the one you physically have to make bow down. She laughed. Connor growled challengingly, and Faith smirked. All right, let's do this, she snarled. When Faith and Connor were kids, their favorite thing to do was to fight out their differences, beat the hell out of each other, and then make up and be civil again. She bared her sharp teeth, and her eyes glowed bright yellow. Connor growled as his sharp teeth disappeared, and he rolled his eyes. Layla soared by Maya's office window, and Tyler watched, chuckling. What's so amusing? His mother asked, looking over some papers on her desk, and he turned around. I wonder what it would be like to fly. She looks so free, he said, and Maya glanced out the window. She saw Layla pass and walk toward her son. She saw Bailey, Faith, and Cassidy talking to Connor, Alex and Cody in the yard, and stepped back as Layla hovered in front of them. Maya smiled at her, and Layla grinned. You look well rested, my dear, and I see you have learned how to use your wings. That's quite impressive, Lay. You're a very fast learner, said the headmistress, and Layla blushed. She ran her hand across the windowsill and shook her wings. Honestly, I have Tyler and Connor to thank, she said, and Tyler looked at his best friend oddly. Connor, what did he do besides scratch you? He asked, crossing his arms. Layla smiled and looked down at the alpha of the Lancer pack. When I transformed, he changed me back and brought me back to you," she said, looking at her childhood friend. Tyler sighed, knowing Connor used Layla to get on his mother's good side, and now he had Layla believing his bullshit. She wasn't from the supernatural world and didn't know Connor Lancer hid behind a good guy facade. He looked at his best friend and decided to try to give her a heads up. Tyler walked toward her and gently touched her face. "Layla, Connor isn't who you think he is. He tried to hurt you, and I get that you helped his face heal, but he's not a good guy," he said softly. Layla searched Tyler's eyes and found nothing but jealousy. Her eyes started glowing crimson, and Maya swallowed hard, stepping back from the window. "For your information, Connor surrendered himself and used pain to trigger the transformation. He didn't fight back when I attacked him. He kneeled on the ground, opened his arms, and surrendered. I felt it," she growled protectively. Tyler's eyes turned yellow, and he searched her eyes, rubbing her cheek with his thumb. He wasn't afraid of her, and she smirked. She didn't want anyone to be frightened, because no matter what the old stories said about the Hellcat, she wouldn't hurt anyone. Layla smiled and pressed her cheek into his palm. "Okay, Lay. If you feel as though you can trust him, I will back off. I know I hurt our friendship, and you to the point where you don't completely trust me, but I will never let anyone hurt you. I love you." She smiled and rubbed his arm. "I love you, Ty," she said, and Maya smiled. Tyler smirked and looked into her eyes. "I wanted to give you a heads up, and I would never let anyone come between us," he said, and their eyes shimmered and faded. "Me either." He pulled her toward him and kissed her forehead. Maya put her hands to her face, smiled, and wiped a tear from her cheek. Layla and Tyler made their family connection. The Alpha Hellcat Dragon Spark was a part of her pack, and she sobbed a laugh. She walked toward the window and wrapped her arms around Layla's shoulders. "Welcome back to being part of the family," she whispered, and Layla grinned at Tyler, hugging his mother back. Maya let go, squeezed her shoulders, and wiped her face. "Now get out of here. Go enjoy your day. See you at dinner," said Tyler, and Layla grinned, flying off. Maya sighed and gave her son a thoughtful look. "Maybe you two will quit with the best friend routine and tell each other how you really feel," she teased, and Tyler sighed, shaking his head. "We ruined her that night my father attacked her. I should have at least called her once and said goodbye, but I only have myself to blame. She will never open her heart to me in that way again." He sighed, and Maya rubbed his shoulder. "Besides, she's an Alpha Hellcat Dragon Spark and I'm a Beta. She needs to find her hellhound." Maya blew a long breath and looked at him knowingly. "Well, don't worry about being a Beta much longer. That will change as soon as we find your father and proceed with our plan," she said, and he only nodded. "Here's your chance to say thank you and move on with your life. Here she comes," said Cassidy, watching Layla land and walk toward them. "You're pretty rude for a tiny girl," said Faith, and Cassidy gave her a smug look. Bailey rolled her eyes, ran toward Layla, and stopped, eyeing the flaming wings. Layla gave her a thoughtful look and chuckled. "Come on, they won't hurt you." Bailey swallowed hard, and Layla smiled as the wings disappeared. "Better?" she asked, and Bailey sighed and nodded. "Sigh. The idea of standing near an open flame doesn't sit well with me," she said, and Layla giggled. She looked at Faith and Cassidy and saw Connor standing with them. She smirked and gave him a clever look. "Wow, Connor, your face," she said with a sad look, and he looked at her oddly. "What's wrong with it?" "I'm sorry there's no improvement. I really tried," she teased, and Cassidy, Bailey, and Faith snickered. Connor frowned, and Layla gave him an innocent look, batting her eyelashes. He sighed as his frown faded and thought she looked so damn cute that his heart melted. "Ha, ha," he said sarcastically, and Layla, Faith, Cassidy, Alex, and Cody laughed. Connor walked toward Layla and put his hands on her shoulders. He looked into her eyes, and she rubbed his arms. "For all jokes aside, thank you. Your tears healed me," he said softly, and she looked his face over. She reached up, brushed his soft, brown locks off his forehead, and nodded. "Good as new," she whispered, brushing her fingertips over his soft skin. He felt an instant calm wash over his body and grabbed her hand. Sometimes when two alphas from different species connected, in the beginning, their instincts tell them to fight each other for dominance in the relationship, and Connor was feeling that deep in his core. He wanted dominance, and he could see in her eyes she wanted the same thing. She searched his eyes, felt the same feeling, and their eyes shimmered. "I just came here to thank you. A favor to repay a favor." He sneered, and she frowned, pulling her hand back. "Really? Is that all because it looks like you have a whole lot more to say? Don't hold back. Please, share your thoughts with the class." She growled, gesturing to their friends. Connor smirked, and his eyes shimmered. Faith, Cassidy, Bailey, Cody, and Alex stared at them and stepped away from them. "I've got a lot to say, so why don't you and I ditch the fan club and take a walk?" Layla searched his eyes, crossed her arms, and scoffed. "Why do you want to get me alone?" she asked, and he snickered. "Why wouldn't you want to be alone with me? Any girl would jump at the chance," he said, gave her a clever look, and stepped closer. Layla wrinkled her nose and made a disgusted face. "Because I'm not just any girl," she scoffed. No. So tell me, what makes you so different?" he asked. "Why don't you tell me?" Connor sucked his teeth, and Layla gave him a sad look. "Why do you ask so many questions? Just walk with me." He scoffed, grabbed her wrist, and pulled her toward the forest. Faith, Cassidy, and Bailey looked at each other and chased after them. "Where are you going?" asked Cassidy. "Where are you taking her?" asked Faith. "I don't know," said Layla, trying to free her hand, but Connor wouldn't let go. Layla gave her friends a hopeless look and sighed. "Stay there and give me a second," she said, and before the girls could answer, he yanked her into the woods. He pulled her quickly through the trees, and Layla whimpered, tripping over rocks and branches. "Connor, stop," Layla said breathlessly. Connor stopped, let go of her wrist, and bent over, catching his breath. "Sorry, we've got to find a way to fight the fight for dominance urge." He breathed, and she raised an eyebrow, rubbing her wrist. She thought momentarily and smirked. When Peter bit her, he passed the knowledge of the supernatural world onto her and knew what was happening between them. "I mean, we could always fight it out and get it out of our system," she teased. Connor looked her over, chuckled, and shook his head. "I would crush you," he snickered, and Layla gave him a sly look. "They say dynamite comes in small packages," she said, shrugging. He swallowed hard, feeling his spine tingle, and she raised an eyebrow. "But you're wrong, big man. I would have you on your knees begging," she added. Connor searched her eyes, and they busted out laughing as the urge to fight for dominance disappeared. He blew a relieved breath and grinned. He remembered why he brought her to the woods, and his smile faded. Layla creased her brow and hugged herself. "What's wrong?" "I need to tell you something, and I don't think you want the class to know." "What is it?" she asked. "The Alpha, the one who bit you, has escaped." Layla's eyes widened, and she shook her head. "No, that's impossible. Tyler would have told me. How do you know?" "I overheard Tyler and his mother talking about it. Peter has escaped," said Connor, and Layla looked at him in disbelief. He searched her eyes and shrugged. "Listen to my heartbeat. See if I'm lying," he said, spreading his arms, and she felt the surrender sensation in the back of her mind. What did the feeling mean? She listened to his calm, steady heartbeat and knew he was telling the truth. "You're not lying. Why didn't they tell me?" she asked, and he shrugged. "I don't know, but I thought you should know. I thought he would have told you." Layla nodded, thought momentarily, raised an eyebrow, and searched his gold-rimmed brown eyes. She thought they were stunning and knew she could get lost in them for hours. Connor smiled and gave her a thoughtful look. "What?" he asked, and she blinked. "So, what favor do you require for payment?" He chuckled, looked at the ground, and slyly grinned. "You catch on fast," he said, looking at her. "I've been told I'm a fast learner," she said, leaning against a thick tree trunk. She crossed her arms, sighed, and looked at the ground. "What do you want?" He snickered, walked toward her, and placed his hands on the tree, blocking her between his arms. He looked at her with glowing eyes and grinned with sharp teeth. "Don't make it that easy," he growled playfully, and tingles shot down her spine. The sound of Connor's growl rumbling in his chest was music to Layla's ears, and she felt something ignite inside her heart. He searched her eyes, gave her an apologetic look, and pushed off the tree. I'm sorry I'm such a dick. I'm working on it, and for what I want. I want to know everything about you and be your friend. Despite the rumors, I am one of the good guys," he said, and she chuckled. Connor looked at Layla oddly, and she snickered. "What's so funny?" "So, you think we can automatically become best friends and what? Do each other's hair?" She teased, and he sighed, trying to hide his smile. She waved him over, and he looked at her oddly. "Come here?" She sighed, and he walked toward her. He leaned against the tree, and she gave him a thoughtful look. "Maybe one day we can have a slumber party, but for right now, why don't we get to know each other and work on trust? Rumors or not, your sister told me a lot about you, and there are some things I need to see for myself," she said, running her fingertips down his neck. He blew a shaky breath and looked at her with shimmering eyes. Tiny shimmering fairies appeared around them, making the world disappear, and Layla and Connor stared at each other. Their eyes shimmered as they felt a strong connection beginning to form, and a rush of magic shot through their bodies. Layla arched her back, and Connor froze as her body pressed against his. She inhaled sharply, closed her eyes, and her scent invaded his nostrils. Her neck was so close, and he licked his lips, bending his head. He was about to kiss her soft skin when they heard screams from the school.